Hi, everyone. Welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our lovely guests, Kurt, who is an ISFP, and Tim, who is an INTP. And today we'll be contrasting FI identity and TI identity. So with these two introverted judging functions, they are concerned with identity, but in different ways. So today we'd like to parse that out. And I'm thinking, Tim, would you like to start us off? How do you relate to your TI, and how do you see it in your identity?
Sure. Yeah, identity is an interesting topic, and it's one that I guess I haven't read a whole lot in terms of identity and MBTI, but just going off of experience, I feel like identity is a really complex topic that MBTI plays into, right? So our cognitive functions, I'm a TI driver and Kurt is an FI driver, but I would say my identity, part of that does come from my TI, but then it's also a lot of other things. Our identity is also how we grew up and et cetera, et cetera. So for me though, the TI part of it more has to do with what you believe. And I know that it's a very common thing for INTPs to spend huge chunks of their lives trying to figure that out and trying to search for truth, so to speak. So I would see that being actually a major aspect for INTPs in particular.
Cool. And you told me, Tim, about how you'll just spend a lot of time just thinking throughout the day, and you'll think. Or maybe it's a refining process of your thoughts that you do just generally.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Being an introvert, I do spend a lot of time alone, and a lot of that alone time is just me being in my head. I do spend a lot of time researching and learning things and watching stuff on the internet and et cetera, but there's a lot of time that's just me. And a lot of times I'm laying in bed staring at the ceiling or pacing back and forth, and you don't know what's going on in my head. But what's really going on in my head is I'm combing through all these ideas of things that I've learned in the past or things that I've experienced in the past. And it's you're constantly refining your model of the world and where you fit into that model. It's constantly going on just every day.
That's fascinating. Yeah, your TI might work with your SI to create categorizations of the truth you see throughout the world. So that's really cool. How about you, Kurt?
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult question. Being the dominant function, I think you have that it's your natural strength, and so it's unconscious a lot of the time. So it's kind of difficult to think about it in that way. But I guess the main thing that comes to me is paying attention to your emotional response to everything, even if that's somewhat subconscious. You kind of just assume that's how everybody is, Because years ago, I actually thought I was FE before I learned more, because I didn't realize, what FI really was, and I didn't realize that I was constantly measuring my emotional response to everything all the time. It's sort of formed, by paying attention to that, what I feel about everything. It's almost that tells me who I am in a sense, because I can pay attention to that. Sometimes I'll have a much stronger reaction to something, and that kind of tells me oh, I don't like that, or I don't like the way that feels. And so that's sort of the initial visceral feeling, and then I kind of try to unpack okay, well, what's going on? Why do I feel that way? And then I guess, I don't know if that makes sense, kind of goes from there.
That absolutely makes sense. I liked how you said you measure your emotional responses. There's a sort of metricizing that FI does. Do I value this, or how am I feeling towards this? So I think maybe judging functions, they have a metric quality to them, even if it has to do with emotions, but it's in different ways, if that makes any sense. So in what ways do you guys think it's different for you? Where what makes your identity feel really good, and what makes your identity feel really bad?
I have to say, I've never thought of my identity as something that feels good or bad. I do think it was interesting, Kurt, what you're saying, that you're like, you have sort of in your memory, you remember the things that you like and you don't like, and having that self-knowledge, I guess, of things you've learned you like and things you don't is really key for you and who you are. Would you say that I got that right?
Yeah, I think so. It's like, because I had this emotional response to something, that's kind of what I think about it. You know, I'm trying to think of like a more concrete analogy that would make sense. I guess if you like taste food that tastes bad, you know, you don't like it, right? As opposed to if something tastes good. So just with the emotion, yeah, in that way, it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of what you said. Yeah.
Okay. Do you, so I've noticed like sometimes people will ask me like what my favorite whatever is. Your favorite movie, what's your favorite color? And I sort of like those questions are always weird to me. They never like why I don't like think in terms of favorites really that much. Like I haven't put a lot of thought into whatever that might be, but I'm wondering if that's like an FP kind of thing. Like knowing another person means knowing what they like to a certain extent, because maybe as someone with FI, you think of identity really in terms of likes and dislikes. I don't know if there's a connection there or not.
I'd have to think about that, but I think there's probably something to that. My thought when Joyce first asked the question about, I forget exactly how you worded it. But,
what makes your identity feel good or feel bad?
Yeah. I think when, sorry if this doesn't, if this isn't responding to what Tim just said, but this is where my brain's going. So, so I was thinking, like being accepted for like your feelings and your thoughts and your opinions feels really good, because it's like it feels so visceral. Kind of like what I was saying, it's like it's just this natural emotional response. And I think sometimes like ideas or perspectives can be kind of attached to that. And so like having acceptance and feeling like there's a place for you to exist and in the world, like it's kind of like I can't change how I feel about something. So if that feeling is like not acceptable in society, or an opinion, then it feels really bad, I guess, because it feels like it's part of your identity. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. So would you say that like for you, identity is, it's not just who you are, but it's also who you are in relation to other people? Like, is that a key component, like how other people see you?
Not so much as like defining who I am, but as far as like feeling like I could be accepted in the world and,
Gotcha.
and like be a part of the tribe in that sense.
Yeah, so basically you might have like FI opinions that are unpopular, but you can't change how you feel about it. So it's like it would be nice if the tribe could make space for your individual opinion, because it's like it's not going to go away overnight and it's a part of you. So it's just nice to not have like the tribe mobs come after. Like Dave's Superpowers says, like people who lead with a self function, sometimes their struggle is getting acceptance of their ideas and opinions from the tribe. And so that's their struggle.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And it's actually difficult to separate your identity from your ideas and your thoughts sometimes, So then it can feel like if your ideas are rejected or your thoughts or feelings, then your identity is, as a person, like you're being rejected. Mm-hmm. But I also wanted to add, I just remembered, to what Tim said earlier about likes and dislikes. I do think that like FI has a much easier time identifying that. And I think I heard someone say with TI that it's like if you ask their favorite movie or something, like an FI person will tell you whether they liked it or not, based on like just whether they liked it or not. Whereas TI, it's like they might respond with like logical reasons for something, like that movie had a good cast and a good budget, so yeah, it was a good movie. I don't know if you relate to that.
Yeah, one thing I realized about myself this year was that I expect other people to expect me to have reasons for the things that I choose, where not everyone actually has reasons for the things that they choose. So a lot of times, and I can't even give you a specific, but I guess what I've learned is that I don't always have to explain myself. Whereas my whole life, I have felt this compulsion, like there always needs to be an explanation. Like everything that I do, there has to be like a reasoned out argument why that was the right thing to do. Whereas half of people in the world are just, they're going off of their gut or their heart, and they can't explain it anyway. So like if I'm talking to a feeler and they ask me, well, like, why are you doing that? Like, it's totally okay for me. Like, if I just say, yeah, I can't stand doing that, so I'm doing this instead. Like, that can be enough. Whereas I never thought that was enough. And so it's kind of liberating, but it's also kind of like, man, I really don't actually know my own feelings so much of the time on it. Like, I've spent so much time figuring out what I think about things that I'm way behind on figuring out how I feel about things.
It's like what feels adequate is like you have to have reasons for it to feel adequate. You can't just feel something, but you also have to back it up with like, oh, explanation.
Yeah.
And so like TI can sometimes feel like they have a philosophy behind why they're doing something, and so they'll give you like this reason behind it, and it's like kind of detached from the feeling, like from a third party point of view. You're like, wow, that's a good reason, but it seems kind of detached.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because it's sometimes like I think I'll even fool myself. Like if I feel sad, but I can't figure out why, like I can't think of any explanation as to why I should feel sad right now, I will sometimes just be like, in denial of me actually being sad, because I can't like conceive of why that would be, so it can't be true.
You need to rationalize it for it to go into your brain.
Yeah, it's like totally compulsive rationalization on everything.
That's so TI.
That's awesome. I have a ENTP friend who she explained something very similar. She said for her, if she's feeling something, she'll ask herself, should I be feeling this? No. Okay, then I'll stop.
Yep.
Compulsive rationalization is the best way to put it. Wow. So Tim, because you mentioned that, I was wondering, do you doubt things a lot then because you compulsively rationalize things? And how about what is your relationship with doubt? And you too, Kurt.
I mean, I guess so. When it comes to impersonal things, just like knowledge and ideas and stuff, I probably don't think in terms of doubt a whole lot, because it's kind of like everything that I know, I kind of like have some idea of how much I can trust that thing based on like past experience. So I'm not thinking of like belief versus doubt. It's just like degrees of belief, I guess. But when it comes to personal things, I would say that I doubt myself frequently. But that's mostly because, well, I guess if you're doing anything you haven't done before, you don't really know how it's going to turn out. And I know if like for me, I'm not always so sure of how well calibrated I am to like the rest of humanity. So yeah, there's definitely doubts there. Or or it could be doubts that like I'm doing the right thing, doubt that I'm on the right path. Yeah.
Yeah. How about if someone tells you something and claims it like to be some sort of fact? Would you feel compelled to correct them, or would you allow them to have that error? Like, what is your relationship with people having opinions that don't make sense to you?
It totally depends on context. So that's like when it comes to other people, like that's an area where FE is going to get involved, and that will determine kind of like I'll look at the other person and I've got to ask myself like this is in the instance they're saying something I disagree with that I think isn't true. Like questions like, is it going to hurt them if they believe the wrong thing or not? Are they going to, like, if I correct them, are they going to be open to listening to that? Or are they like completely set on what they believe? I'm looking at the other person to see kind of like what, like, would it be a good idea for me to correct them or not? And if not, then I usually just leave it alone. And then even if so, like it really just depends like on the context. Like, is it important? Do I need to have a conversation with them about this or not? Like if it's some benign thing or maybe something they just really like, and I'll let them have it sometimes. I would say like probably the closer we are, the less I let things go, which maybe isn't the best thing, but maybe it is. I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's like your FE is the gatekeeper of whether or not your TI opinion gets out. So it's like, well, this FE consideration, this FE consideration, does that override my need to TI? Maybe. And then you'll do that compulsive rationalization, but like regarding FE criteria, you're like, does it like make sense to FE do this? And then you'll do like the TI thing where you go like this reason. And then sometimes you can talk yourself out of reacting. How about for you, Kurt? What is your relationship with people having opinions that don't make sense to you?
Well, I think my initial response is probably curiosity. Like, I want to know why. Like, what is it in your life or in your thoughts, or how did you come to a different conclusion? You know, and I love to. Well, I don't know if I love, but I want to have the conversations around that, around the ideas, around the perspectives, to see like how do we arrive at such a different place. It can be tough, like kind of going back to what I said earlier, it can feel a bit alienating if you're the only one with an opinion on something, but it's like I would say there are doubts sometimes for myself as far as like, yeah, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Maybe maybe I have the wrong perspective. And I guess partly is because I have had some pretty big perspective shifts in my life. And so that's a possibility, I recognize that. But I guess it kind of ties in with like having a strong feeling about something. And not just like the opinion, but usually the feeling is probably tied to something like a deeper value, like, I don't know, freedom or honoring people. There's probably something underneath, that I'm associating with that opinion that I have. But yeah, I think I'm mostly curious, unless it's something that I've just like formed a pattern on and I've seen over and over. It's like people come to that opinion and conclusion because of this, because of X, Y, or Z, and it just seems like it's always the same every time. I think in the end, I try to hold on to certain values though. Like I can coexist peacefully with people with different ideas and opinions and values. And I guess even like I'm in my mid-30s now, so even at this point in my life, it's like sometimes you have to learn like maybe we just don't talk about those things, and the rest of our it's not worth it at the expense of a relationship sometimes. So I don't know. I think I'm getting off the question a little bit, but
But yeah, it is open-minded of you to like also like be curious and like to have like multiple perspectives. Like I hear some NI talk too. You're like considering the multiple perspectives, and that FI that there's like beneath the TE possible like argumentation, there's possibly like an FI root to it that you might not be seeing, that no one really knows about. Whereas with TI, I find that sometimes it devil advocates, so it will rationalize every angle, but you won't really know what it believes in, because sometimes it doesn't actually have a belief there. It just really wants to like logic it out. And so sometimes there's no FI root to a TI opinion, and it's just logic because it is needing to fulfill some sort of rationalization. Like it needs to get to the end of the rationalization, so it keeps using things, but it might not actually have a stance on the topic, which is interesting about TI.
Yeah, that's definitely true for me. Like most like popular issues and things that people debate and get upset about, I don't actually have a stance on at all. That, not to say that like the discussions aren't interesting, because they can be, but it's just like there's multiple, like especially if it's a contentious issue. The reason why it's contentious is because like both sides have valid points, and if it were cut and dry, then people wouldn't, be upset about it. So yeah, for stuff like that, for sure, it's like I kind of want to see where people are coming from. I'm really curious to learn, and the way to learn is to figure out the different ways, like the different angles that people can approach the topic. And as far as like coming to a conclusion, like I only have to come to a conclusion if like I personally have a decision that I need to make, that I need to like have that belief defined for myself before I know which way to make the decision. But if I don't have a big decision to make, I can leave a topic undecided, and it's fine. So I don't normally, but I have in the past, I guess. Maybe that's more like as I've gotten older. But at least for me now, I don't feel like I have a lot of strong attachments to seeing like things my way on most things. Of course, I say that, and it's probably a blind spot. So maybe I'm wrong. Especially when it comes to like FI stuff, like, because I kind of feel like sometimes FI, like I can't see my own FI very well, and therefore it's kind of in charge of me a lot of times. So
yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, so one of the ways I use to differentiate like FI from TI is that with the FI user, I can normally tell like where their values lie. Like if they're debating a topic, they actually do have a firm stance on like one side or the other. But sometimes, like I noticed with TI users, some of them will debate it for the principle. Like I don't know, it's like because it has multiple angles, they are undecided, and you leave the argument wondering what the TI user actually thinks about the topic. And you don't always know unless it's like a big topic that they care about. But on regular, sometimes TI is kind of hard to differentiate what they actually believe. So another question I have for you guys is, do you have to experience something to know how you feel about it? Or do you have to experience something to know what you think about something? Do you have to have a concrete thing to go off of? How much of your TI and FI is linked to experience?
Well, I would say for me, like if I experience something, that'll give me in all likelihood, a much more accurate opinion. In that, like I can have opinions on things that are actually unfounded. Like I can imagine, have this idea and I see it, oh, that's not going to work, that's going to be bad, and I might be wrong. Like I might think that way and I might have that opinion, but then when I actually go try it, that's when you know for sure. Like that's when like it either confirms your suspicions or you learn something new.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. Yeah, it's like, I guess sometimes I'll think that I know how something's going to feel ahead of time based on similar experiences in the past. And I guess sometimes I'll experiment and kind of push myself and say, okay, well, that's just what I think, but yeah, let me go and experience this thing. I think most of the time it kind of goes how I expect, or at least my emotional response will be kind of what I expected. But I think it's always still good to like even challenge yourself and like put yourself in new experiences and just kind of, because at least for me, like I can get too stuck in that like FI/NI place instead of experiencing the world, just thinking, yeah, I already know what everything's gonna feel like, which it's not entirely true. I have to keep myself from that trap. And even if I was right about a piece of it, it's still like the real, the physical world that we live in, and still need to experience it.
Yeah, I think that's the trap that all introverts find themselves in from time to time, right?
Absolutely. Okay, here's the question I have for you guys then. So, this is specifically, I have a question for Kurt. You were talking about how, like, ISFPs, like, it's either like they have a firm feeling on something and they know for sure, or they don't have a firm feeling and they just go with whatever. And so, could you talk a bit about that? Like, you either know what you value or you really don't, and you could just go with the flow.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's like if that strong feeling is not really there, then I don't necessarily feel the need to form an opinion about something. Or on the flip side, it could be difficult. Like if I'm trying to form an opinion about something, but my gut like isn't really telling me one way or the other. It can be difficult, and I find that problematic sometimes when like the tribe, wants you to have an opinion on something. And it's like, I don't know how I feel yet about this. But yeah, it kind of goes back to the like measuring, like the how strong that emotion or feeling is attached to something. It's such an interesting, I don't know how to like put that into better words, but it's just such a visceral thing that like sometimes I'll even be surprised, like, oh wow, I'm having like the strong feeling. I might not even know what it is. I might have to go in and be like, okay, why am I feeling this way? What's going on? But yeah, it can be a little bit like crippling when you want to make a decision and you don't feel, especially on something important, like where to go to college or something like that. It's like you're used to making decisions if you're FI, kind of with that internal compass of FI leading you and like, okay, let's go this way. And if it's not there, then you feel a little bit like stuck or lost.
Are you ever in a situation and then you realize how you feel, or is it beforehand, after? Like when does that emotional realization happen for you that you feel something towards it?
Ooh, that's interesting question. I feel like with my FI and NI, I want to always predict how will feel so that I don't like get hurt or disappointed with things. which kind of, again, can be like a trap to keep you from experiencing things. But yeah, a lot of times it's kind of like not until you're experiencing it in the moment. It's like, oh, I don't like this, or I do like this. Yeah, and sometimes I could be pleasantly surprised, you know. But it's funny as I'm thinking this through, like I can kind of tie the response that I'm having to like a reason. Like maybe, let's say I wasn't looking forward to going to an event or something, and then it turned out to be good, but I'll be able to kind of pinpoint it was like, oh, I really enjoyed it because I got to spend time with that person or something along those lines.
I wonder if maybe this could be a possible differentiator. Like, maybe FI uses like a reason to justify its value, whereas TI uses like, okay, wait, I was trying to articulate something. For TI to feel comfortable with having a feeling, it likes to like figure out the rationalization behind it. So to justify valuing anything, TI kind of needs to figure out like the reason, whereas FI, it'll start out with that value, but it will know a reason behind it, but the reason is not the end all be all. It's more of a added on to the value. So the value is the base for FI, whereas like for TI, like that rationalization needs to be there for it to feel secure with whatever it's experiencing or comprehending.
Yeah, sorry, I think there's like a little delay when I'm talking or when I'm hearing. So I was just gonna add, I don't know if like every thing that I feel through FI is tied to a value. Like sometimes we use that language a lot of like values with FI. Sometimes I just feel like it's like visceral desire or liking or disliking something. It's not necessarily tied to a value. It's just like preference almost. I'm not really sure how else, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
Visceral preferences. The FI. Okay, so we came up with two terms from this. Tim said TI is compulsive rationalization, whereas Kurt's like FI is visceral preferences. So I think that's a pretty interesting way to see it.
I think there's crossover though, at least
yeah.
from my perspective. Like, while I do all of this compulsive rationalization, like values are still a thing. It's not as though like maybe some INTPs would love to be able to just be a robot and just do the logical thing all the time. But that like you can take a logical argument so far, but only so far before you run into values. It's like when Kurt gave the example of like trying to figure out, well, which college should I go to? Like that's the perfect thing because like, okay, so if a TI person is facing that question, like they can go out and pros and cons, these different schools and career ideas, and like I could make this much money if I go down this path. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, what is the goal? Like, what is the value that you're chasing? Is it money? Are you like, I can optimize to make money, but is that what I care about? Or maybe it's impact, or maybe it's like having an easy life, or there could be a whole bunch of different things, which there's no real logical thing to indicate which of those you would want to choose. It really kind of boils down to a value.
Yes.
And that's why like INTPs can just be as confused as anyone else about those types of the same decisions that get everyone else stuck. We also get stuck in. Because if we don't know what we want, TI kind of like not super helpful all the time.
It's true. But that's interesting. So TI to like make value decisions, I think like it clean slices data. So you said pros and cons. To me, listening to you talk about like how you'll make pros and cons, it sounds like clean slicing the reasons and then to figure out where your value sits. So maybe TI needs to like clean slice it to know what to value. So I'm wondering, maybe like Kurt, how would you put your experience of it?
As far as, you mean as far as like knowing what I value, or?
Yeah. Like, where do your reasons come from, and where do your values come from? What is the relationship between your reasons and your values?
Hmm. That's a tough question. Let me think about it. Let's see. Relationship between my reasons and my values. I guess a lot of the values probably are similarly to how I said, they're just visceral. Um, it's like I find myself, that's what feels good. I guess maybe like aligning with your conscience is another way of putting it. Um, and so the reasons probably, hmm, I'm I kind of want to say like the reasons have to align with that. I don't know. That's like the best way I can think of putting it.
Yeah. I wonder if that's what like judging, introverted judging is. Um like like making reasons that align with your conscience. Because if you're not aligning with the tribe, the only other choice is making decisions that, I mean, or ideas and thoughts that align with your own conscience. But I think maybe like TI gets to its idea of what is like aligns with its conscious by clean slicing data, and then it from those reasons that it sees as um clean and like pure, like they then make an argument that most aligns with their conscience. um I'm so sorry, it's so vague and abstract, but it seems like Kurt, you do like the same thing in the sense that like your values align with your own conscience, and so you know whether something does or doesn't, and then you understand it through that. There's this cool quote from one of my friends called Nick Stride. He talked about DI, and I thought it was really cool, so I'll just pull it up right now.
While you're looking that up, I was kind of realizing that sometimes my reasons, I think, actually point to the values. I never really thought of that before, but like I'm looking at some of the times when I'll be trying to like share my reasons for having an opinion or whatever, and I'm realizing that they actually point to the value, the underlying value. Um,
That is such a good way to
which are
put
usually
it.
very like, FI type things.
That is such a good way to put it. Yeah. With FI, its reasons point towards its values. Wow. Maybe like with, okay, this probably might not work in verse, but I'm like with TI, maybe like the values that like the end idea, like the things that they say at the end, the rationalizations, the values lead to their reason. So like the values that they make all lead back to a certain reason, or maybe, or
I don't know. I would say that it could, but I think it takes a lot of work to reason yourself to a set of values. It can be done, but it's like not ever in a satisfying way, I guess. Like, I could go read a book of philosophy and I could be very moved by it, and yeah, this is a great argument, and I could start thinking that way, and I could adopt those values, but it's not like fully satisfying to my TI because there is actually a lot of other books of philosophy out there with different opinions that I haven't read, and I can't definitively say like, I have arrived at the one true value. So it usually doesn't actually come out that way in my life, although sometimes it does. There have been times where I've like researched my way into like believing in a certain position, but a lot of times it's like just the basic things of living. Like I'll want something or not want something, and instead of me actually feeling that desire or aversion like I think an FI person would, I'm not conscious of that feeling. And what will happen is my TI will come in and explain why I feel that way. And so I'm actually tricking myself a lot of the time, thinking that I have a well thought out argument for something that I actually deep down just simply want. And so like, it's kind of like a potential curse of having TI is that you can create an argument to justify just about anything. And you're not totally aware, like when your argument was something that you did just like to selfishly justify a thing that you really wanted, because you're not always aware when you really want something. So I guess it can go both ways, but in the day to day, it's actually like feelings leading around thinking by the nose, if that makes sense. And then it's like those occasional moments where you're like, no, this isn't working. I have to go like really figure out what I believe about this. And then you take in more information, do some thinking on it, and probably come to a different stance than you had before. But it may or may not actually, you might not feel like you're totally centered on that new position. Like it might feel off because it's actually disagreeing with your feelings. Like somewhere deep down, it's not all in alignment. So I don't know if that made sense. But
Yeah, that made sense.
Wow.
I'm wondering if a part of also justifying like what you do like with reasons is a human thing. Like people, they have wants and they sometimes use reasons as a way to cover up their primal brain. So it's a human thing too, maybe. Also, you mentioned this cool thing, Tim, about how you'll read a philosophy book and you kind of like go like, you don't really value that because you're like, well, there's like other philosophers out there that have a completely contrary point of view. And TI's goal is to like take out the value of it so it can then at the end add the value. But it's like, it's kind of like this because people come with biases. Like people are either biased towards someone or something. And TI doesn't want to be biased towards someone or something during its rationalization process. So its goal is to like, when it dissect something, is to eliminate that bias from itself, but also from the source that it is receiving it from. And so it might, at the end of this rationalization process, come to what it values from it. But I think while it's thinking, it takes out the value because that might distort how you comprehend the concept. So I don't know if that makes sense, but when my TI tries to figure out what it believes on a topic, I'll sometimes put valuing it on like a standby until I figure out what makes sense about it. And then I'll add the value back. But it's this process of doing that to figure out what makes sense. If that made any sense.
yeah, I think TI always really wants to be objective. Like it wants to be impartial. It wants to take the 10,000 foot view and like look at all of the different like details of an issue and kind of have like TI really wishes it was NI sometimes. It wishes that it could put all these things in, and it tries to like find an argument like through the issue, but it works obviously it works completely differently from NI or whatever. But yeah, I think that's something that I see in myself. When I know that I haven't like fully researched something, you kind of put it on the back burner. Maybe you have some sort of idea of where you think you're trending on that issue. Like it really seems like I'm going this way with it, but you just haven't had time to like fully sort it out yet. And so like you might even avoid like making mention of that thing, discussing it with other people until you have it fully sorted out in a way that like you're personally satisfied with.
Yes. So fascinating. So Kurt, you had something that you wanted to say.
I was thinking, just the way Tim was describing TI, like I wonder if in a hypothetical situation where you have to debate a position that you maybe don't believe in, I feel like TI might be much better at doing that, because with FI, it's like, if I don't feel it, then it's going to be really hard for me. Sorry, I don't know if that was related to what you just said before.
That's so valuable. Like anything
Mhm.
related to getting to the bottom of this is related.
I mean, I definitely see that as true.
It's very true.
Yeah. Yeah, because TI is
then
pretty
maybe-
detached, so it's easy to switch your positions.
Very easy to switch your positions.
Yeah, and then maybe on the flip side, when FI does feel strongly about something, is when they might, be even more willing to debate or come at it much more passionately. It's like FI having a strong opinion, and then you have like TI like filling out this whole spectrum of like, and then you have the FI with no opinion on the other end.
Tim, what does TI look like when it has no opinion?
What does it look like when it has no opinion? Well, I mean, so TI being an introverted function, like most of it is going to be under the surface in a person, right? Same with FI. As like an external person, like looking at another person, you're only going to see TI come out in. Actually, you don't actually directly ever see TI because you're only seeing the extroverted side of the person as you observe them, right? So you're seeing a person's TI maybe through their FE or NE or SE. So it's being filtered in that way. I would say like when TI doesn't know what it believes about something, it will keep it to itself because it's undecided. Like it's usually not going to come out with like, this is how it is, if it doesn't know that's how it is. But it might come out that way if it's a situation that feels like play, because a lot of times TI people will engage in debate almost like a sport. Like it's fun to, if you have someone else that's going to take maybe a different side, or even not a different side, but just has like, they had their own way of getting to the same conclusion as you and maybe discussing it to figure out like, oh, that's what they saw and that's why they got here. You get more information. It can be, if like you feel comfortable as a TI user with the group that you're sharing with, you might express ideas that aren't fully formed yet in hope that together they'll become more fully formed in the discussion. So I guess it depends on context, right? I think though that like if you are talking to a TI person and they're presenting a view, you can usually tell like how much they've thought about it by how strongly they argue that position. So like if I haven't thought about something but we need to decide what to do for the day or something trivial, like and then you like I say we should go do this and you're like, no, I don't want to do that, then I'm gonna let that go because it's not that important. But if it's something that like I spent a ton of time really trying to figure out because it was important to me, then I might wait. No, we gotta talk about this. That's not right. I don't know.
Oh, that's very valuable. It seems like you guys spend a lot of time like figuring out internally how you feel or think about something, and that's really admirable. You spend a lot of time like in that space, and that's really cool. My question for you guys is, how do you feel when someone misunderstands your intention? So I don't know, you do something for someone and they get your intention wrong.
Oh, I hate it. That's how I feel about it. I don't know if this is like my FI or NI, but I really hate being misunderstood. I always think like, why did you assume the worst about me? Like there's so many conclusions you could have come to. you know, like, why did you pick that one? So yeah, I don't like being misunderstood. Because I feel like, yeah, it's kind of like you're I'm assuming the person is making a judgment in order to come to the conclusion that they came to. And so I think I naturally always like, not that I do it 100% of the time. You know, nobody's perfect, but my natural stance is kind of like holding that space until I can like either confirm what their motive was, or just like not assuming the worst. I think that's probably like a big value of mine, is like trying to assume the best about people. So I don't like it when other people don't do that.
Like you said specifically, like misunderstanding intentions, right? So like for the most part, I think most people, well, people never think they have bad intentions, right? Like everybody thinks that the reasons why that they do things are the right reasons.
Yes.
So I don't know if it would have to be like a specific situation. I could see myself getting defensive about it. Like if someone totally misreads me and they think that like I'm saying something because I'm selfish and this is going to get me what I want or something like that. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's so far from the truth. Like I might just pull away from that person. Like I can't trust this person to actually understand me at all.
Yeah.
But I could see, you know, if it's someone really close to me questioning my intentions, someone I trust their opinion, that I feel like they really know me,
Yeah.
then like maybe I'm going to stop and look at myself and try to see if they're right about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Interesting.
know.
So, cool. So the reason why I asked that is because like FI is normally associated with intentions, and I think I just realized the reason why. I think because FI and TI spend so much time like thoroughly thinking something through, what could be offensive to them is when someone makes a quick judgment call. So basically with FI, it's like a quick judgment call on their character, or like a quick judgment call on their preference or value, because it's like, well, they spent like this introverted process and so much time coming up with what it thinks and what it feels, that when someone makes a quick assumption, it can be hurtful. And like with my ENFP friend, she hates it when people misunderstand where she's coming from. And like my ENFP friend will want to TE correct you. So it'll be like, "Oh no, you're not getting where I'm coming from." And then she'll explain to like she'll either get hurt, like really hurt by it, or like she'll get hurt and then she'll explain to me like, "Joyce, like that, like no, like that's not the reason why I said that. And like you need to know my intention." And I was like, that's a very firm, like, needing to tell me your intention. Which is like, I know that everyone has good intention, and I totally agree. I mean, sorry, everyone sees themselves as having good intentions. But what I'm getting at is that, like, FI users, when you see their character as, like, in a way that's untrue, they're more likely than not to, like, either be deeply hurt by it or correct you on it because it's important to them. But with like I've had that happen to me less with TI users, but maybe one day in the future, it'll happen, and then I'll go like, oh, I've been proved wrong. But there's a point I had to make with this. TI hates quick judgment calls, like FI hates quick judgment calls on its character. But TI specifically is like that, like it's like quick judgment calls without considering logical intricacy. So FI gets peeved when people make quick judgment calls that ignores emotional intricacy, whereas TI gets peeved when judgment calls lack logical intricacy. And it's like, hey, there's no consistency, there's no there's incongruity here, and it's like it's like kind of offensive with how little they thought through that, or it's like, and so does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there can be those situations, like especially like TE things, actually, like because TE will, make decisions, and like it can paint with a pretty broad brush. There can actually be like a lot of nuance and complexity to a situation. And like TE will be like, no, we just need a solution now to like, we have to do something now to get through this. Like, that's clearly what we have to do. And it does that. And then TI is like, but what about all of these things that you didn't think about? But that's, I think that that's like a different thing from the more like internal thing that you're talking about like getting offended by people. And I think for me, that's actually going to play more into my inferior FE, those situations. It's like if someone wants to like break the connection with me, right? Like they're upset with me, they misread the whole thing, and now like they don't want to be friends. Like that is like that hits me where I'm weak. Like
The tribe, yeah.
yeah. So I guess those feelings are more like FE for me versus
That
like
is
EI.
that is fascinating. So maybe it's the last function that hurts the most. Like Dave Superpowers says that the tidal wave of the IPs is the tribe. So when the tribe comes and it kind of like punches you, sucker punches you in a way, it can be like hurtful.
Yeah.
And maybe the tribe is where it hurts.
Well, and the other thing too is like FE can, it's another thing, like just being a TI driver does not mean that you do logical things. Like FE can take over my TI. If I have an opinion that everyone hates and like I get shot down on this and people feel strongly, like it might change my opinion. Probably won't change my opinion, but I'll never talk about it again. Like it's just, no, I'm not like comfortable with making myself not fit in the group usually for a point of view, unless it was like something that was just non-negotiable, I guess. But how often is that the case? So yeah, FE can like absolutely manipulate me.
Oh, wow. How about you, Kurt?
Oh, yeah. So I think with like that whole FI and motivations, I think a lot of it has to do with like how strong our conscience is. So like I'm constantly examining my own motives. I noticed that like probably even from like being a young teenager. You mentioned earlier how like FI and TI are like constantly examining that inner world, and I think FI does that a lot because it's like I don't just want to be seen as a good person. I actually want to be a good person. It's like highly important because I'm the one that has to live with myself and my conscience at the end of the day. And there's like I'll spend a lot of time like I just might not feel right about something when I'm going throughout my day or when I'm going to bed. And it's like sometimes that'll tell me that I have to like do some examining of like my behavior or my thoughts or something. So I think because we put so much into like making sure that our conscience is like in good standing and checking our own motivations all the time. So when other people misunderstand our motivations and our intentions, then yeah, that can be really tough because it's like I'm already so hard on myself in that area, and like not to not that I'll never be wrong about something, but I think that's, at least for me, I think that's the reason why that whole intention and motivation thing shows up so strongly. And I also think that, or I like to think that I'm good at reading other people's intentions. I guess I don't know how to describe that, but I feel like pretty often I can see what other people's intentions are as well.
It's so cool that like you diving into your intentions helps you understand the nuances of someone else's intentions too.
Maybe that's where NI comes in, because I think, NI is looking, watching itself, like your own mind form the patterns, and so that pattern of like examining your motives and like what it feels like I'm trying to think of an example. Like let's say I feel compelled to do something charitable or like generous. I'll be like examining, like, am I doing this so that this person will like me, or is it more of a pure thing? And if it's not if it doesn't align with my values in that sense, then I won't do it, because I don't want to do something that's that's more where like the values come in,
Yeah.
personal values.
That's so fascinating. It's like FI searches for purity of its values, maybe like TI searches for purity of its reasons, or logic, purity of its logic. So you guys think about it a lot because you want to arrive at the place where you can be like at like get at that, if that makes any sense. And so I thought
Yeah.
a good yeah. And so I thought a good quote to like semi end this off with is from my friend Nick Stride. And he said that TI and FI is not really to do with the self. It's more about some abstract path or principles which the self must remain focused on. So I thought that would be pretty cool to say. And any closing thoughts you have about this topic, guys?
Well, I just really like what you just said about TI and FI being like sort of the pursuit of purity, but in two different ways. It's like purity of intention and purity of, I guess, like conceptual purity or logical consistency or something.
Purity of
really,
rationalization.
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that strikes me as very true.
Yeah. Purity of intention and purity of rationalization is like the comparison you can put against these guys. So cool. Thank you so much for coming on and talking. Any closing thoughts? I just like want to make sure that I don't cut you off.
I'm good.
Anything pressing?
Yeah, the only thing I just visualize again like a compass and like having that needle point, at the right, and then at the right exact spot is kind of like I think what your FI and TI is like. It's wanting that precision of where exactly, the direction is that you want to go. That's my visual analogy.
Yeah, it's funny because TI and FI at like, on one hand, they couldn't be more opposite, but on the other hand, they're like so similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah. TI and FI can look very, very similar. But thank you guys for coming on. I learned a lot from you both. You both are wonderful individuals, and I'm very thankful to be both of your friends. And it just makes me happy to see you guys, like to have this chance to chat with you guys. It warms my heart. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And thank you, viewers, for tuning in for this long. If you made it through this super duper uber long video, it just makes me like, single tear in my heart because I'm just so happy that you found it worthwhile enough to watch this far. So, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And yeah, I guess it's time for the outro. Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.